What's up guys? Today we're here to talk about 6 things I don't like about the Sony A7 III. Number 1 is how easily the sensor gets dirty. Basically, because we're using an electronic viewfinder in the A7 III, we don't have a mirror in front of the sensor like you would in a traditional DSLR. What this means is that every time you go to change lenses, your sensor is exposed to whatever's around you in the environment you're in. And what I find that results in is a bunch of dust on your sensor after every shoot. I'm having to clean my sensor at least once a week at this point. So if you're gonna pick up one of these cameras, I would really recommend picking up an air blower, an Arctic butterfly, maybe a sensor loop, things that allow you to maintain and keep your sensor clean. Otherwise, you're gonna have big ugly dust spots showing up in all your photos. Number 2 is especially frustrating coming from Canon, and that's a lack of in-camera multiple exposures. Basically, with the 5D series of cameras from the 5D III onwards, you could do in-camera multiple exposures using the live view screen to overlay and line up your existing photo with the texture or whatever you wanted to put over top of it. In Sony, we don't have that at all, and you're limited to only doing it in Photoshop. And I'm gonna make this one number 2B because it's kind of in the same note. You can't do free lensing with Sony with native Sony lenses. Essentially, with Canon lenses, when they're detached from the camera body, they default to having a wide open aperture, which when free lensing allows you to get that tilt shift effect with a really shallow depth of field. With Sony, when you remove the lenses from the camera, the lenses by default are closed down. So even if you try to free lens, everything's in focus anyways because you're at f/22 or whatever the minimum aperture is for that lens. Number 3 is the feel of the controls. And what I mean by this is that the Sony controls tend to feel a little more sluggish compared to a traditional DSLR. Coming from a 5D4, as soon as I roll the wheel to adjust the exposure for ISO, aperture, or shutter speed, the change is instant and it shows up in my viewfinder right away. With the Sony, it does tend to feel like there's kind of a split-second lag between when you make those changes to the controls and when you actually see the effect come up. This is much more pronounced when you're doing a dramatic exposure change. If you're going from, say, 1/4000th of a second to 1/200th of a second, you're gonna roll that wheel and you're gonna wait for it to catch up. I don't know if this is because the screen in the Sony is having to display so much more information compared to Canon, but whatever the reason, it's noticeable, it is a little frustrating. It's not a big deal, it doesn't stop you from being able to work effectively, but it's just good to be aware of it. Number 4 is related to the silent shooting mode on the A7 III. Basically, Sony has a new option that's available on all their latest generation of cameras that totally kills the sound while you're shooting. It's a different type of shutter though, so unlike Canon and Nikon, which only have mechanical shutters, like the Sony also has an electronic shutter that you can use to completely kill all sounds. So with silent shooting turned on, this is what it sounds like. Nothing. It's amazing when you're shooting wedding ceremonies, people getting ready, if you're shooting a concert, something like that. Really, really helpful. The flip side though is that because the way the electronic shutter works, you can get a crazy jello effect on some of your images because the sensor scans the scene from top to bottom. What this means is that if you're shooting while panning quickly, or if your subject is moving really quickly through the frame, you're gonna get a weird kind of artifact of everything looking sort of slanted and jello-y in the frame. So just be aware if you're planning to use the silent shutter, it's great, plan to make use of it, but plan to use it when you're not moving quickly and when your subjects aren't moving quickly. Number 5 is the size of the camera body. The new Sonys are great. They're small, they're lightweight, they're portable, but they might have taken it a little bit too far. Personally, I think the body is a little bit too short to be fully comfortable in your hand, and I wish it was a little bit taller. As a result, I use a grip extended to the bottom of this to give it a little bit more heft in my hand. I wouldn't say that this wooden grip I've got here is ideal. I've got another one coming right now that I'm gonna be reviewing shortly. But one way or another, if you don't have really small hands, I think you're gonna wanna get some kind of grip or extension to make this fit into your hand more comfortably. Number 6, seems small, but actually it comes up a lot every time I'm shooting, and that's the location of the lens release button. In Canon, that button can be found down here. It's very easily accessible. On the Sony, it's kind of tucked in between the battery grip and the lens right in here. And it makes it so it's a little bit awkward to get at every time you're looking to remove a lens. So you're kind of having to squeeze in there to be able to reach in and get it. You can still obviously remove your lenses easily enough, but it's a small ergonomic annoyance that could be easily changed if Sony made a couple little tweaks. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you want to continue to follow along on my journey of switching from Canon to Sony and see lots of lens comparisons, image comparisons, body comparisons, general photography tips and tricks, please subscribe to my channel and hit that like button.